Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group podcast, where we teach skills on communication and connection. Krista wanted to dive into some things that we went over last time and give some more nuance on some subjects.
Yeah, I said a couple things that I wanted to clarify. One of the first thing I said was that I had the realization that I've probably had this inner stillness my entire life, and that's why I've seen a lot of visions. And reflecting on that, I'm going, what are you smoking there, Krista? Because I did when I was younger, but when I I really lived with a lot. I did have a lot of inner stillness, and I had that mystical life going on, and kind of struggled to fit into the world in some ways because I had this interior life to this degree. And then when I got into the cult at 18, I would say for a good 20 years, I did not have inner stillness because of and you articulated it really well, what you said. So I'm thinking anyone that saw me during those 20 years, they'd go, she didn't really have inner stillness. It seemed like she needed to go on a retreat. Your comment you had about that.
Well, it was once you portrayed your soul, you no longer had the ability to be still because you weren't at peace with how you were living your life.
I wasn't at peace, and I had so much I was working through, and I got married. I was immediately, when I got out of the cult, I was with your dad, and the struggles with that relationship, and then being back in the evangelical church, and all the conflict that I had internally about that, that I was just outside of my body, all the trauma. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, as a childhood looking back at it, the more I know you as a person and the beautiful person you are and how great you are at regulating your emotions now, you just didn't have that. Yeah. During my childhood, it was, everything was an outburst. And as we understand these nuances of our soul and our inner peace and how that shows up in our actions in our life, I find that so much of your explosions from my childhood had nothing to do with what you were exploding at, but your your inability to connect with your true self, and feeling that you were betraying yourself, and how that was being perceived by others, and so.
Yeah. And I guess reflecting on this is why I love doing this podcast with you, Riley, is it's just the best thing for me to do my inner work, is that it is making me feel very connected to people who have been points of great pain in my life because of their lack of emotional regulation and their lack of inner stillness, that I feel more connected to them because I'm aware of where I have been. Well, I see myself in them.
Well, it's that beautiful phrase of not beautiful. Hurt people. And the more you understand how someone else is hurt, the more compassion you have for them. So even though someone might have hurt you, you don't take it as personal because you understand how much pain that person had to have gone through to even make the actions that hurt you.
Yeah.
And that's that going to the bigger picture.
And it's weird because I was experiencing yesterday thinking about this and going, that is why I love quote unquote my enemies. I love those who have come against me in some of the greatest attacks upon my soul, because I hold their own pain as not separate from me. It's like, wow, I love these people.
Well, and those are the largest opportunities for us to grow and change.
Oh my God.
Right? Without those points of pain and suffering, we wouldn't have blossomed into this beautiful human being that we are now.
If we allow ourselves to crack open, if we allow it to crack us open and to become love and to go to the vulnerability and to go to the self-compassion like we were talking about last time and not harden up, that's where the beauty, comes in. And we're going to get into in a few more chapters about numinous love and those visitations that I had that came as a direct result of the assaults that came against me. And so that's where so that was the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say was about having a psychedelic brain and having a lot of visions. And I would say that, and you were clarifying is, and being a mystic is one I would clarify is there's a lot of mystics that don't have a lot of spiritual experiences, and that could be how the divine is working in their life that sometimes even weans them from any of those even blissful experiences. It's just this space and this trust. And then some people are not that visual, or they don't have that many mystical experience. I was just listening to Mirabai Starr talk about after her 14-year-old daughter died and this spiritual experiences she had. She goes, I'm not someone who has many spiritual experiences, and surely she's a mystic. So I felt like I wanted to clarify that, but that you were also wanting to clarify something about the psychedelic brain, that a lot of times it's not visual.
Well, I think everyone, when they think of psychedelic, automatically thinks of visual experiences, and I don't necessarily associate psychedelic with just physical. I think actually most of it starts in the body. I think most of our psychedelic experiences, from breathing exercises, from chanting, from really spiritual experiences, actually do come more in the body. People talk about the warming sensation that go over our body, these moments of divine presence where you are really just being in the moment and you feel the love coming through you. That that is not a visual experience but a physical one, and to me that is a psychedelic experience that you don't need drugs to feel. That people
I love it. Feel. I love it. Then the third point that I was reflecting on was I talk in these sort of half sentences, which I'm going to get better at as I do. But I was saying how we were talking about how we're going through, the world's going through some very tough, challenging times, and that we're feeling those challenges. And we're also at the same time feeling all this joy and peace, and in many ways doing better than we ever have in our lives. And I said something about, not liking myself. And what I meant was I'm liking myself now more because of my capacity to love, but to be in integrity. And one of the things I'm using this podcast for, is to walk in more integrity by speaking up about what I believe to be true, and how I don't like myself when I am feeling the culture wars, the identity politics, everything. And I'm saying this because I know many other people are feeling this as well, where there's this pressure to conform, to be silent, to be politically correct in not a good way. The political correctness that is beautiful because it's sensitive in a healthy way to how we speak to another, but political correctness, which is this.
Well, I think so often it's used only on the left, but I think we're using it right now in any group setting where you feel like you have to say what the group believes, right? It doesn't have to be a left or right
because
thing.
The stakes are too high to speak up.
As soon as you don't have the ability to have the nuance and have the conversation because of the fear of the group.
Yeah.
You are betraying yourself.
Yeah, I would say that was for me in the evangelical church, because I'm also, I was in my heart of hearts from the time I was a teenager, really meant for a contemplative path that is more of the meditative desert fathers and mothers kind of inner stillness, more of a high church experience than the evangelical or charismatic Christian experience. And so I was always betraying myself. You know, you can't question divorce. You can't it is this group think that we succumb to, and I feel like I lose my soul, and I didn't like myself when I am not speaking up. And you were saying something.
Well, I was saying how appropriate this is for the chapter that we are diving into, because you are quoted here. The chapter is called "It's None of Your Concern," and the quote is by you. To get some people to like me, I'd have to sell my soul. And I think that's ultimately what we're dealing with is, evolutionarily, when we were in tribes, it was so important to be accepted by the group because the group was so small and the group was all we really had.
To survive.
Right? And now as we've been siloed and more into the power and the importance of individual thoughts and individual thinkers, it's encouraged to create the space to where, exactly you say, for some people to like me, I'd have to sell my soul. And it's more important to like yourself than to be liked by others.
Yeah, and I think, that's the thing about the soul is what is your individual path? And that individual path is, for me, is the ability to use wherever my intelligence lies, to use that for my own discovery and the contribution to the whole, which would be in the ability to use inquiry, to use the Socratic method, to question our limited awareness that thinks we know because we've been told by the way journalists, how that has been so captured now, has told us what the facts are, or
how people are literally afraid to ask questions now, right? It's
in these Ivy League universities,
right, in the place that they're supposed to be asking the most questions. It becomes fearful to ask questions. It becomes almost immoral to ask questions now when
because
stuff
of the
is
mob.
Right, because things are put in front of you now. It's like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. If you just ask a question, if you go, oh, that's a weird coincidence. Oh, we're matching we're putting things together. Oh, who do you think you are? A conspiracy? You think everyone's just lying to you and being manipulative, and it's like, no, I'm just observing the information that's being put in front of me and asking questions.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when where again my intelligence came out, and I got to go to school, my middle school years primarily in Aspen, Colorado, which was so cool on many levels because it was just this very open to inquiry. And that's where my intelligence was really shining, the very things that I would question. And then I remember after I became a Christian at 16, where all of that had to be shut down. And it was all about conforming. And the part of me that I sadly lost, the beauty of connecting to Christ and the teachings of Christ, and the sadness of this conformity that lost my ability to think freely.
Well, I know from my experience in the church, and that's dismissive of questions, was the message that was portrayed onto me was the devil. The desire to ask questions of the church was only put there by the devil. That's how I was shut down in my questioning. I remember being like, no. To think about a question is the devil getting into your ear. And I would argue it's the opposite. Yeah. The Lord always wants us to ask questions because the universe I believe, put us here to continuously ask questions of ourselves and others, question our reality, question. I mean, I think one of my favorite questions everyone asks is, what do you believe the purpose of humanity, or what do you believe your purpose for life? To me, that is a open-ended question that is meant to be put here for us to continually to grow.
I love it. I remember, and then we'll get into the chapter, but I remember the church we were at, and it was right before I left the church, and I remember hearing the youth pastor was giving a sermon to the whole church, and he said, your intuition is evil. And I just were going, God, get me out of here. That this is what this young
To me, that would be the
man is
opposite of what
teaching
God
our
would
children.
want. To me, that would be the opposite of what God would want. He wouldn't have given you intuition for it to be the root of evil.
Yeah, it's the inability to sit with the nuance, and that is why I'm not a pew sitter. I need to be in an environment, and I hope this is where we're moving to society, that can dialogue to go, I just remember all the years I sat in church and going, are you, what? What did you just say? Because I didn't feel it was skillfully said. So you're just like having to unpack these absolute statements. And that is my beef about anything. When you cannot go, what do you mean by that? Clarify that, you know? And it's been a great pain point my whole life that's ended up becoming my gift, is I want to be able to teach the nuance and live with the nuance and try to become as skilled as I can in teaching the nuance.
Wonderful. So I'll repeat it again. To get some people to like me, I'd have to sell my soul.
Mm-hmm. For us to be liberated from ourselves, to be leaders who change the world, it's helpful to have mantras that protect our minds from going awry. We can't be telling ourselves stories as to whether or not someone likes us or likes what we do. I don't mean the human resource director who says, I'm not here to make friends. And I should have clarified what that meant. Is I've seen the human resource director where that's their little phrase to go, I'm not going to communicate in connection, awareness, or inquiry. I'm just going to, right? I'm just going to tell you how it is. And that's the kind of the phrase that I'm talking about. I'm talking about our preoccupation with what others think. For some, this looks a little different. Some are plagued with thoughts that they've let everyone down and it makes them want to move away and start over. That would be me. That would be me my whole life. Or really and I think after it was always like, I can't do this right. And I was watering the backyard again. And I just said, wow, the one thing I've wanted my whole life, and I want more than anything in the whole world, is to learn how to love well while practicing elegant and intelligent self-care. And to not know how to do that well, and to feel like, and I could almost see myself going, oh, I'm just going to go to this little town and just make sandwiches, and I don't even eat sandwiches, like it's just to escape that.
Well, I think you really said it so well. The desire to love well while practicing elegant self-care is, from my experience, it's so rare to find those together, right? Those people that love so well tend to abandon themselves for the desire to love others well. And then, or those that love themselves so well don't have the ability to have any reflection on someone else's experience and have a real hard time loving others because they're so caught on this aspect of needing to love themselves or protect themselves that they don't know how to love others well. Right? Like I don't see many people with that both. And that's why I was saying that statement is so powerful, is they tend to lean more on one than the other. And usually the completion of one blocks out the ability to do the other.
And that's the infinity loop. It's the always the both. So as I was reflecting on Thomas Merton, who died in 1968, so that was, a different era, but he talked a lot about self-love only in the negative. There was no of the language today of, oh, you need to love yourself. And what he was talking about was the narcissistic self-love. And I see actually that going on as touted as authentic self-love. And a lot of times it's like, oh, no, that's very narcissistic self-love. It's the love of the self that isn't loving others.
So for what rings in my mind of this form of self-love was this realization when I was going through a really tough, dark time. And instead of focusing and worrying about loving myself or worrying about my problems, when I searched for someone else to help, how that became a form of loving myself more, right? It's let's
and you
not
have self-respect,
right? It's hey, I don't need because I'm not doing something that is putting myself really out. I have the ability to help this person, so I choose to. So instead of sitting in my own suffering and sitting with my own pain and oh, poor me, I go, oh, well, how can I serve someone else right now in this space? And to me, that is finding that balance of self-love and loving others, right? I was loving myself by caring about someone else.
That's great. That's great. If you check in with yourself, you may have a thought that isn't helpful but habitual. It has to do with how you're seen or experienced by others. It doesn't make you more emotionally intelligent. It causes you to be preoccupied with thoughts that keep you from being present. It's not about your need to take inventory of what you may have contributed to someone being harmed. This is a bad loop that keeps you bound. I stood in yoga class. From the right side of the back of my head forward, my soul spoke. It's none of your concern. That was the instruction to me while I was concerned about someone's reaction to me. They weren't their usual warm self. It wouldn't have been appropriate to ask them. Needless to say, I wasn't being a present yogi. That sentence, it's none of your concern, came to set me free. It was a directive to be able to serve more effectively and get out of my own way. It was to liberate me from how I contribute to my own suffering. I just don't want to contribute to my own suffering anymore.
Yeah, and I would say so often we think that our suffering is caused by others, and maybe it is initiated by others, but I would say the root of most of our suffering comes from within. Because even if someone started your suffering, the suffering continues by how we mull over it or continue to sit in that.
Since then, I have that instruction as a guard around my mind. It's become so obvious that it's none of my concern what others think. It's expanded to, it doesn't matter and I don't care. And it was interesting. I was hearing Jordan Peterson say something like, well, if you don't care what other people think, he basically said that's like a sociopathic quality. And I have really thought about that, and I think he's incorrect. I think there are mystics that are free and going, I don't think Byron Katie cares what anyone thinks about her.
Well, so I think there's this balance, because it's not that you don't care what anyone thinks, it's that you don't care what the crowd thinks. Because obviously I care about what you think of me. You're my mother and you're my accountability partner. You have the tools and the education to have a respectable, valid opinion of me. For me to not respect your opinion of me would be to not be willing to be held accountable. But to not respect the crowd who doesn't really know me is a superpower. And I think that is the difference is no. There are some people that we should very much care what they think about us because they have enough information to make a healthy assessment of us. But the people when we shouldn't care is when we're talking about the crowds and the masses and the people that are taking a short clip of us and running away with the assessment or a one interaction. And to me, I think that is that
I know
nuance.
you've said that before, and I think that's interesting. And it's not that I don't respect your point of view, but there are times when I'm okay with you. You've disapproved with decisions I've made, and I could feel, and I was like, oh, I'm okay, and I'm not concerned what he thinks about me right now. Like you've seen, like, oh, you're back in your patterns again, and I'm like, I'm okay making this decision, and I can tell that even I can respect it, but it's none of my concern what you think about me. And that's where I'm going to still hold that. I like
that because I think it's about embracing your own calling. Because even as your accountability buddy, my view of you, even if I go, yes, you're in these habits that I don't think are serving you, at the end of the day, it's your journey and you need to like the decisions you're making. And so I validate and I agree with that statement of going, yeah, he doesn't need to agree with these choices right now. I need to think that these are the best choices to me. Is that kind of where you're getting at?
Yeah, and it just we'll go into it later, but how our expertise can be the very thing that can trip us up because we don't know how God is working in someone's life.
So true.
And so, I mean, they talk about that a lot so even if the principle you're saying is true, that you're going, Krista, you're abandoning yourself here, or you're allowing this, there's, relationships are so interesting and tricky.
When they change so much from day to day.
From day to day to day to day. To go, okay, well, what am I working out? And that's where I don't, I have my own self-agency and sovereignty, and that's how I like to coach, is it's very much, it's like Martha Beck teaches. This is what I'm seeing. Tell me where I'm wrong. She does not tell people what to do. And that's why I like to say, okay, let me remind you what you just said. Let's help us think together for your soul to guide you in what you need to do.
Well, because our teaching is all about empowering of the self,
yes.
Right? We aren't here to tell you how to live your life, but to empower you to know how to live your own life.
Yeah.
And so I think that is ultimately what even an accountability buddy is about, is not holding someone accountable for the way you think they should live their life, but holding them accountable for the way they think they should live their life.
Yeah.
And having that be a nuanced conversation that is always changing and developing as we grow and change with our environment.
And being super present to that was great. A client sent me I think it was an LA Times article, kind of about the whole coaching industry, which I don't use the word life coach, I say transformational coach, but how there's like this addiction to this cultic needing people to tell us how to run our lives, and that could be come out from therapists or coaches or, these guru that can, we need, or doctors that we have this parent-child relationship with, which I really see. And that is the opposite of being able to really have the self-agency to think for yourself and to challenge anyone.
Like you said, thinking for yourself, I find so often people are afraid to think for themselves and are almost belittled, right? Because how many people will go, well, I'm not a doctor. Well, I'm not a therapist. Oh, I'm not a psychiatrist. So as if that makes it so that you can't have an opinion on something.
Right.
Right. I think it's really sad how many people will degrade their own personal experience because they aren't labeled something that gives them the authority over that subject. And it goes, oh, are you saying that what you experience isn't really real? To me, like they're overriding their own firsthand experience.
Or you haven't heard wisdom from 100 top level psychologists that you're able to synthesize. Just because you don't have a degree in psychology doesn't mean you haven't been exposed to some amazing wisdom that goes, well, actually, there's some very prominent things that are coming out in research that can't contradict what you're just telling me.
Or let's say you don't even do all that, but you don't even have the language to express something. And just because you don't have the language, all of a sudden you don't have the right to express it. And I would say it's the opposite. The infinity loop is about embracing the lack of skill to communicate something, knowing that we are holding that space for you to find your way. It's not that, oh, we don't want to hear from you because you don't have all the right language. Oh, you don't have all the right teaching. Oh, you don't have all the right schooling, so your opinion doesn't matter. It's no, all your opinions matter so much that we are going to hold that space for you to, bounce around in the dark, really, let's hit these walls and go, where is your truth? Communicate it, because no one else can communicate your truth.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's the anti-cult.
Exactly.
I love that. With 7.6 billion people on the planet,
Closer to 9 now.
It's 8. I think it's 8. We're at 8.
Okay.
Combined with the history of civilization, meaning I very much connect with the history of civilization, like freaking 30 times a day. I'm just at least 50 times a day. I'm so aware of my ancestors.
We say one of our little prayers is we're on the backs of giants and so grateful for our ancestors. That's one thing I like to pray every time I'm eating my food, of going, thank you for my ancestors who worked so hard for giving me the opportunity to eat this lovely food, and the work they had to go through.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter, which, again, it's like we obsess about one person. We go, there's 8 billion people on the planet, right? And you're connected with the history of civilization. Like, life is short. Let's not ruin this precious life being concerned about what someone thinks about us. There's a lot that matters that we should be concerned with, but what someone may think, say, or write about us must not have the power to take us from being present. We don't need others' approval. I see it as an invitation to detach from my small self. When people criticize me or whatever, it's like, let that bring a good ego death to me. And Richard Rohr is so great about that when he gets very, 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 very criticized by the church because he teaches the more universal Christ, but he looks for the 10% of truth in the criticism that comes at him. Oh, what's true there? We don't need others' approval. It's not usually personal. Others have their own filters they experience us through. What they say may be true about us. In that case, we humbly accept it. If it's not, we let it float on by. We need to be present to do this work. Our concern is whether we love well and not what others think about us. It may sound extreme, but I don't think so. If we need to see something about ourselves, we will. That's like saying when you are open to go, what do I need to see about myself? And you are really committed to doing this work, boy, life will show you your faults. If we need to see something about ourselves, we will, without twisting ourselves into a pretzel as we wonder what we did wrong or how to get others to like or approve of us. Some of us will find it easier than others based on our own personality. Some temperaments are more focused on how they're perceived, while others don't seem to care that much. Whatever the case, it is the call of the soul that's beyond temperament. This is the call of a leader.
In what situations do you find yourself concerned with what others think of you? I think it's more natural to find yourself when you're in the group think, whether this is school or the church or just
Political.
any group environment, I find that concern can creep in.
Yeah.
In what situations do you hear your thoughts that you let others down, or something else that's tied to how others may perceive you? In sports, in business, the uncommunicated expectations that others have, and how much that can weigh on us. Is there something you need to clean up if you've been in the wrong? I mean, if you're in the wrong, yes, we always need to clean up after ourselves. I mean,
I think so.
And some of the cleaning up and I think most of the time the cleanup can just be acknowledgement. Right?
Yes.
Like
need to
90%
acknowledge it.
90% of the cleanup of our bad behavior just comes from acknowledgement.
That's the infinity loop. You go and go, hey, I wanted to just revisit, and I realized I'm sorry the way I spoke to you the other day. I mean, that's
being short with you at the car, right? It's like
that's the infinity loop.
Because I believe it's a way of clearing the air without blaming others.
Or you are stepping into your infinite self that can hold your own shame. You don't have to pretend that you didn't do something that was
We don't have to
unloving.
pretend to be perfect.
Yeah.
We can acknowledge our shortcomings.
Because everything belongs.
What would it look like to replace the concerns with thoughts of love for others alone?
Right.
Yeah. What would that look like in your life?
Well, I noticed it at that moment. Like I knew it wasn't, there's sometimes like someone ignores you and it's just, then the next time they see you, they're super warm. They're just thinking their own thoughts. But this, I knew what this was about. And it was someone who I had helped as a client. And it was all tied to what was coming out regarding my necessary nemesis. And she had heard something and she had changed her opinion of me. And, I'm not clear to this day what I did right or wrong and how I handled the situation. But I was just going, that's where it was like, none of your concern, instead of going, oh, because I would have to sell my soul because there's things I disagree with how she would see the world, that to this day I go, no, I don't think you should handle a situation like that. And so if I just the focus was on how do I love this person, let them go, not judge them, send them love and and not need a person to like me.
So what practices will you put in place to help yourself detach from thoughts about others' opinions of you?
Mine is the mantras.
Right.
Mine is, it's none of your concern. It's not your job to like me. It's mine, which is that great Byron Katie quote. It's none of your concern. It's none of your concern. If you want to be someone who speaks truth and changes the world, little by little by little, moment by moment by moment, you have to not be concerned about what anyone thinks, because you're trying to help people even get out of groupthink and raise their level of awareness and authenticity.
And how would you say that those mantras have helped put a guard around your mind to minimize your contribution to your own suffering?
That's like the, which we're going to get into, the infinity loop and the whole, in yoga, and how like the Tibetan monks have this little, what do they call it? Oh, but it's like a little book they almost carry around of truth. And
it's like their book of mantras.
Yeah, it's like their book of mantras. It's like their book of truth. And it's like you start renewing your mind with truth when the ego is concerned what anyone thinks about themselves. The true self isn't preoccupied with that. It's just trying to walk cleanly through life.
I know the phrase that I use a lot that has helped me pop out a lot of my own suffering is, I believe the universe is working in my best interest even when I'm not. And so that is going from not beating myself up from decisions I might make, so that even if I am making the wrong decision, knowing and trusting that the universe, that God, however you want to phrase it, however you see it, the bigger movement force of the world we live in has my best interest in heart, so that I can trust my decisions. I don't have to go, is this right or is this wrong? I can go, no, this is the best decision for me right now, and the best result will happen one way or another.
Yeah. And I would say the more I'm becoming aware of numinous love, loving Krista, and identifying with that loving, compassionate presence, I'm disidentifying with the smaller self. So I'm not so worried about it. It's just having compassion on me, trying to figure it out. Trying to do my best today.
Well, as we figure it out, we row our way home. In our vulnerability is manifested true invincibility in the world, childlike yet truly mature, knowing nothing yet manifesting the source of wisdom. That's transformation. James Finley. We must never underestimate the need to tell the truth. Thomas Merton.
We're in a constant dance between our false self and true self.
Just as you even say that sentence and that quote of, we must never underestimate the need to tell the truth. And what really comes up to me
ties in with last chapter.
Well, it is the importance of what is the truth. So often people, I've talked about this before, will attack someone under the guise of sharing their truth, right? Though this is my truth, so I have to say it, and they're attacking someone with their truth. I would argue, even if the truth is about calling someone out for maybe their wrongdoings or shortcomings, it's never about attacking that person. Because the telling of the truth isn't about shaming or putting them down, but about bringing the light to the things, to our mistakes. Because pointing out our mistakes doesn't make us less than. It just is a beautiful opportunity to grow and change.
And that's why the skill of inquiry is so underutilized and so powerful for development, and something that Leo and I used very, very, very foundationally in our development in the corporate world, is using inquiry to help people discover the truth within themselves to up level.
Right. It's like asking questions that allow someone to see the errors of their ways without having to go, you did this wrong. Let's ask some questions for them to understand
their
that
process
they did
versus leading questions that are parental, right?
So well put.
Yeah.
Well put.
The false self is our identity we formed from our accomplishments, failures, our personality, and all that goes into our ego construct. It's not bad. The true self is our essence that really isn't anything, because, right, it's the space. It's hard for many to want that because it feels like nothing. It feels like free fall. The great mystery is in that nothingness is everything. It's liberation. Oh my God, that's it. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That's meditation. That's it. It's living in that, the emptiness of the ego mind and the identification. Recently, I've been focused on the move away from my identity to my essence. I walked up to my usual rowing machine at the gym. This is in 17. As I approached it, I recognized a woman I knew but never met, who's 21 years my junior. She was on the stair climber to my left. With the few words we exchanged, it was clear she already had a story about me, and it wasn't good. Later, I was told she'd been warned about me. She knew I wanted to speak with her in regards to someone she'd been intimate with and still endorsed. Through my inner work, I had become clear I was complicit in a con by my protection of my necessary nemesis. I gave people the impression that who I protected was a good guy as I led lambs to the slaughter. She was certain that what she knew and saw of this person was all there is. The experts in decision-making and thinking models say this faulty assumption, what I see is all there is what causes us to miss important discoveries about people, data, and all that we don't know. Persona isn't all there is. We talked about that before, about this coach who basically was so certain that all she saw was all there is, and that all the women who had had issues with a particular man, that it was all their own trauma and that none of it, and all their own projection. And that's what you kind of hear that being used against people. As I began to row, I could feel my utter vulnerability. My intention is for women to look out for women and want to hear the truth. We always have the choice to inquire deeper or discard it. I knew I still had an open heart for her, and that openness allowed me to feel it all, right? We're talking about vulnerability here. This healer that I went to taught me to go bigger when I encounter what comes against me. So bigger would mean, we're constricted, right? From pain that comes at us, and that makes us smaller. And the expanded awareness makes us bigger. I breathed in and exhaled in an expansion of my being. I was aware I felt the love inside, but it didn't protect me from what I felt came against me. I was vulnerable in the presence of pain. As I moved forward on the machine with my legs pulled in, I brought in great compassion to put his wings around me and hold me in my utter vulnerability. My humanness needed to be cared for. I would not put on armor and return the disdain. When I pulled back, I moved from my identity of me that is being spewed upon by her story of me. She didn't have the power to name me, my heart, my truth. I moved past the watcher, the observing myself versus being held hostage by my feelings, to being the watcher of the watcher. It was like a cream-colored field behind me. It was also like a protection. Pure awareness holds it all in love. I'm not dissociating. I feel it fully, uncomfortable in my small self, which identifies with my story, right? If I'm being spewed upon, this person doesn't like me, is in fact spewing disgust and hatred toward me. When I choose to move out of that place of suffering to my essence, the nothingness, the cream-colored field that's beyond that Krista, I'm filled with an abundance that's untouchable. In that death to my small self, I can't be touched. Like I work my body, I row between feeling fully and allowing and letting it go. I honor the human condition in that young woman and in me. The week that followed, I ran into someone else I wrote about in this book. That's the woman who I was talked about, who was at the meeting at my house, which I talk about in chapter Clarifying the Infinity Loop. So it's so interesting, right? Happened in the same week. When I saw her, I was again utterly vulnerable in my humanness. My heart wasn't armored, but full of love. She had so much hatred for me. I felt totally laid bare, which is interesting because I talk about how her partner reached out to me 40 months after this and said, she just didn't know how to reach you. And I was reflecting on this. I'm like, yeah, but she also didn't know how to live from her heart in vulnerability and love. And if she was so angry that she couldn't have access to me, she didn't come to me with any love or vulnerability when she saw me. So, there's a little bit of maybe responsibility, I'd say, in that. She had so much hatred for me. I felt totally laid bare. And I'm also going to say this is something that I've seen in the shadow part of sort of this new age women empowerment thing that talk about these fierce women. And it's this fierceness that's got this edge to it. And we should have our edges, right? But this edgy, hateful, aggressive bitchiness that people have called fierce in this women empowerment movement, which is not an alpha woman and is not the divine feminine and is not the infinity loop. Which is partly why I wrote the book.
From my male perspective, the problem I tend to see is the women that are identified and cheered on for this fierceness. It's not just the fierceness that's the problem. It's that is all they have. They don't have the fierceness with the loving softness and vulnerability. They only have the fierceness. And that even when the fierceness might be directed inappropriately, there is no self-reflection. They double down. They go, how dare you think I'm being a bitch? This is just me standing up for myself. And, there's no ability to have any self-reflection of going, okay, yes, I was trying to be fierce, but maybe I could have said that in a more loving, connecting way, right? Yes, I needed to encourage and protect myself, but maybe there is some truth that I wasn't being a form of connection. I was just projecting my reality.
That's the unquestioned ego that Byron Katie talks about, right? That's just going to fortify the ego. Yeah, that's when the ego's not in a good place. Yeah, it's so good. I was clear what I discerned about her energy, her expression, and why we would not be friends. I remember this was in Trader Joe's. When I walked away, I looked down and my body was filled with love like electricity. But my heart, you want to say something?
Well, that's the psychedelic experience right there. Is
so vulnerable and present in inner stillness.
And
that's
so
the gift of
and
vulnerability.
so truthful with your soul, right? When your soul is being freed, even that's why your body gets filled with that love and electricity, because you are not betraying your soul. Everything in your body was telling you, no, you should shut down. You should placate to the crowd. You're being attacked. Just fall into place. But you go, no, my soul would not like that.
Yeah.
And as you step up,
going to the bitch, the flicking of the hand, going, you're a bitch. Like that. That ego, I hate that feeling.
Because you aren't dismissing her experience either. You're still fully hearing her. You're fully acknowledging her experience. You're not going, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's like, oh, I hear your pain and I don't register and I don't resonate with that. Is that correct?
Meaning I took it on, but I'm not going to return the disdain. I'm going to look at you upon love. And the truth is that I am sorry that I wasn't at the ability, and I may not be at the ability today, had she come at me, to have handled it wiser and better and more in my true self. I am sorry for all the ways that I don't love well. And whatever she needed me to be, I could not be. And so I could feel sorry that I couldn't sit with her, and take in any more of that aggressive hatred without feeling I was going to lose my way. When I walked away, I looked down and my body was filled, with love like electricity, but my heart pounded and I wasn't protected. She still stood in the vicinity with me with an intensity of cold hatred. It felt like she could hit me. It felt so emotionally violent. The amount of bullying energy that she was getting off on threatening me.
Her moral superiority.
More superiority. And, I guess I might as well bring this up now, again, where this is all my karma. is the falseness that I had supported her, where she was actually doing this to someone else and I hadn't asked the tough questions. And I find that, it's always when someone's doing something to someone else, you just watch, they're going to do it to you. And you think you could just be so loving and supportive that they won't do it to you, but they're going to do it to you. And I was like, that's my karma. I supported her doing that to someone else until I saw, I was like, holy shit, this isn't good. And then that's what came at me. I began to row in my imagination. Again, I immediately pulled in great compassion to put his wings around me and hold me in love, meaning all that spewing energy was not, and hatred was not going to get in and name me. It was an invitation to pull back from small Krista and be the watcher and then the watcher of the watcher. Essence is there all along. When we find ourselves in situations like this, we row our way home.
How does this metaphor of intentional self-compassion pull in great compassion versus being numb or defend? Help you keep your heart open in the presence of pain in a way that serves. I know for what I teach and some of the people I coach for men is I talk about vulnerability as the biggest strength. It's so often we talk about the importance of protecting ourselves, but I think as men, we are so easy at doing that, and we need to actually press on the pedal of vulnerability. And I think that this ability to have that self-compassion can allow us to be more vulnerable and allow people to attack us without feeling attacked, really, because you're being open to it, but you're not identifying with whatever is being portrayed because you have the self-reflection, but you're not being wrapped up in the moment.
Yeah, and if you can row your way home, because we just talked the last podcast about, it's like, oh, there's a way you work with both energies. This is it. This feeling of going, I can feel my vulnerability, that I'm open in pain, and I am not just this, oh my God, I'm this infinite field that can hold and take care of myself that's suffering. I can be in like this rowing.
Well, and rowing, so it's
Right?
two sides of something.
Right? Oh, and two sides.
If you are only pressing with one side, you then go in a circle.
Yeah.
But you need both sides of something to row your way straight home.
So there's,
right? That's
good.
what you were referring to.
Well, I was also
things.
referring to, that's really good, but I'm also referring to, because these visions come and then you figure out what they mean, and I just found out another level of what it means. But it's you're in your constricted pain, and you're going, I'm going to then feel it, but love myself in it, and bring in great compassion. And as I pull back, that's the watcher. That's the watcher that's not identified with it, right? That can watch it and go, oh, I'm not going to lose my way in my small little, I'm going to pull back now and go, whoo, there's my infinite self.
And so would you say, is that how you integrate this tool in your life so you encounter what comes against you? So when you encounter the things that against you, you use this metaphor.
I row my way home.
Right.
I can feel it. I'm going, okay, I'm feeling this. Wow, I'm feeling, and I see myself on the rowing machine, and I'm pulling back and going, there's the infinite self, there's the cream field, there's the abundance, there's the capacity to love myself and another that's spewing hatred at me.
So what I thought it was, once we're triggered to where what comes up is a reaction that we wouldn't appreciate if we were doing it to someone else, that's the remembrance of needing to row home. No, I am about to act in a way that I don't want to act.
That's like the red pouch.
So I need to remember my red pouch, pull that out and know that this is in me as well, and row my way home to my base, right? Go back to that is not my concern. I need to how do I operate from love and
How do I
compassion?
operate? And the rowing your way home is a way of loving well while practicing elegant and intelligent self-care.
It says the small self-suffering and the cream color field that holds nothing but pure awareness, while great compassion stands to protect, holding it all in love. And ultimately, that is what rowing our way home is about, is how do we hold every interaction with love? Even when someone is spewing hate, how do we row the conversation even back to love by either asking questions or creating that healthy environment?
And I would almost say also that's like you're creating inner stillness, because like rowing is such a meditative thing, and that's bringing in the psychedelic brain, right? It's just bringing the awareness of love, of like the holiness of this interaction, right? Bringing sobriety. Love it.
Well, we come to the end of another chapter. We thank you so much for joining us on this adventure. We really hope these tools and stories help you and guide you in your life to be more connected and a better communicator through love. Thank you so much for joining us on the Infinity Loop group. Till next time, have a great rest of your day.